Toward a Theory of Instructional Design, I titled it. And I'll give you a brief list of some of these, how this happened. When I was in graduate school, B.F. Skinner came to talk to us, and I don't remember what he said, but I remember at the end of his presentation, somebody said, Dr. Skinner, tonight you said blah, 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 and in your book you said blah, blah, there seems to be a contradiction. And Skinner said, hell, do you believe everything I ever wrote? And for me, a little guy from Farmington, Utah, I thought, oh my gosh, he doesn't agree with himself. And that was sort of a great liberation for me. I quit believing everything I was being told. And I should have learned that much earlier, but I didn't. The second thing he said changed my whole life. He said, all I've tried to do is to make a very few assumptions and see how much of human learning I can explain with those few assumptions. And I remembered that as I got into graduate school and we started talking about learning theory and instructional theory. I said to myself, you know what I want to do? I want to build an instructional theory because I had already decided that learning theory and instructional theory were different. I want to build an instructional theory using that same idea. Very few assumptions and see how much about instruction we can explain. All right, fast forward to 1972. 1972, I'm at Brigham Young University. I'm a young guy with a PhD wondering what the heck I'm doing. I get a phone call from Fred Kerlinger. Fred Kerlinger was the editor of the first Research in Education for AERA, volume number 1. And he calls me and he said, Dr. Merrill, I don't know you, but you've been recommended as you're a bright young man, and we need somebody to write a chapter in this new book on instructional design, theory, and research. Are you up to that? And I said, oh my gosh. I said, well, yeah, sure, I'm up to it. And I said, how long do I have? And he said, well, we've been working on this for 6 months, but the other offer dropped out, so we have 3 months. And I said, holy mackerel, what am I going to do? But I remembered, as I sat down with great fear and trepidation, I gathered up all the kind of research I could find on problem solving and concept learning and so forth, because I didn't want to deal with paired associate learning in that sense. So I wanted at least some kind of higher level of research. And the big thing at that point in time was expository learning versus discovery learning. And I decided that all the discovery that one guy was deciding was the same as the expository this other guy was. I said, those words don't tell you anything. You don't know what the heck this research is all about. You need some way to describe this. And so thinking about my Skinner experience, I said, I wonder if I come up with just a few things that I could use to describe this research and make it clear. And so then we came up with, and I was trying to make an impression in those days because I was young, remember? And so I came up with, I said, you could tell something or you could show something, which I called expository and inquisitory because those are the big words. And then I said, the way you could show is a general thing or a specific thing. And so I call those generalities and instances. So then we had 4 presentation forms: expository, generality, inquisitory. Forget those, just remember tell, show, act, and do. And so I've evolved to that. So that was the first time we did it. We took those categories and we tried to describe all of those research studies we'd found, and we found that we could describe them very precisely with this kind of formula kind of stuff. And not only that, we could tell that we could immediately see the difference in these. So that was sort of the first attempt to get there. All right, we fast forward a little bit. BYU formed a Department of Instructional Research and Development. Actually, they asked me to head up a media department, which was also a great honor. As a young guy in my early 30s, we want you to start this department in media research. And I said, I don't care about media research. I don't want to do media research. I don't even want to go AECT because it's a cut-and-paste organization. That was my bad. Anyway, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do instructional research. He said, okay, then start an instructional research department. Here's 2 faculty positions. Here's the secretary, and here's a pot of money. And so I'm sitting at 33 years old saying, holy cow, this is wonderful. But then what we decided to do was we said, we want to combine a doctoral program with this. It wasn't a doctoral program. So with Harvey Black and a couple of faculty members, we decided we're going to form a doctoral program. We proposed it in the College of Education. We proposed it at the College of Education, and they looked at this young guy, really smart aleck young kid. And I'm sure they said, we're going to fix this guy. So they approved it. and later they told me we approved it because we knew you were going to fall flat on your face because you'd already set entrance requirements that excluded all of our graduate students already. But it didn't fail. It worked out really well. But one of the things we did was combine research. We said we want students to do research. We don't want to have classes for a PhD. We want them to do real things. So we had them do a proposal, to do research, to develop a piece of product, and we all said, you have to submit it to the real world. You have to submit your research review for publication, your research proposal, or your research for publication, and you have to find some way to produce your development. So that was what we had to do. But in the process of doing that, we had these kids work with all the different faculty members. We produced probably 20 or 30 really good research studies, and many of those studies, at least the ones that worked with me, took these categories, and we had this little system we'd worked out in this first paper and investigated those. So I have a whole drawer full of all these technical papers that these people did. And that led eventually to kind of formalizing this, and that kind of took place during the ticket project, which I'll describe in a minute. But we tried to formalize what we had done, and we needed a name, and so I said, well, we have a series of displays, and we want to talk about the components of displays, so we named it component display theory. And the component display theory then was my sort of the first attempt at doing what I wanted to in graduate school. Well, I'll make this a long story short. Component display theory then sort of evolved, and in 2002, Charlie Regeluth challenged me. I told him that all of the research, or the instructional design theories he's putting together in the green books were all the same anyway. And he said, I don't think so. No, he didn't say that. He said, Dr. Merrill, I don't think so. Maybe you should do something about it. You all know Charlie, he's very formal. And I said, okay, I will. So for the first time in my life, I decided to read what other people had done. And so I looked at a lot of different papers and to see what was going on. And I came up with what we call first principles of instruction, which I've played around with ever since. I just wrote the last paper on it. I hope it's the last paper on it, just recently. But anyway, that's my attempt. So a lot of you know about the first principles of instruction. All right, now I want to go to the other theme for just a minute or two. Am I okay still? The other theme I have is toward automating instructional design. My major professor was Larry Stollerow. Larry Stollerow wrote the first monograph on computer-based instruction that was ever written. It was called Teaching by Machine. It was published by, I don't remember. I read that, and he was my major professor, and so here I am with 5 other students. We have our own computer, an IBM 1620. 16 stands for K of memory, by the way. So he said, we're going to build a teaching machine. So we did. We built a machine called Socrates, and it was a rear view projector microfilm reader that had 17 buttons on it. It would move it 1, 3, 5 frames forward or 17 frames backwards. But because it was buttons, anytime you program it, it'd be easy for a student to figure out where you go next. So we put the computer in between, so the computer controlled how many things would go, and that was the system. That was called Socrates. It took hemlock early on and died. But at any rate, that was an attempt to do automatic things. When I got to BYU, I met Vic Bunderson at the University of Austin. He had bought an IBM 1500 system. That's one of the early computer-based instruction systems. And then I decided I wanted to hire him. I got him to BYU. I got him in the provost's office. The provost said, Dr. Bunderson, we want to offer you a full-time position as a full-time professor. And I thought, I've really tried to get him, and he always told me, I'll never come unless I get a full professor at $50,000. So he offered him full professor at $50,000, and the phone rang. And the secretary came in and said, the phone's for you, Dr. Bunderson. He said, just a minute, excuse me. Went out, came back in and said, I can't accept the position. I just got a big grant from NSF. I have to go back to Texas on my lab. I said, dang, I missed that guy. Well, he got this big project to do a computer-based instruction system, which was called Ticket, two-way interactive computer information television, which turned out to be what it is anyway. But anyway, we had this opportunity. Here we were trying to design this system. I won't tell you all the events that led to it moving from University of Austin to BYU, but here we're trying to do this system. Now, I had the opportunity because Vic was traveling back and forth, kind of trying to move, so I got my students together and said, we're going to design this system. And I said, what I don't want a system, I want a system that knows how to teach. And I want, so this faculty, who in this case were English professor and a math professor, can just bring their content. They can put the content in the machine, and the machine will know how to present it to the student, how to interact with the student, how to collect data, how to do tests. All this stuff will be built into the machine. And some of my students said, whoa, you know, I don't know. But Vic wasn't around to tell me no. And so, so we that's where we got to that point. And then we had a NSF meeting, and we were describing what we were going to do. And so on this machine, we had a rule, example, practice button. And so the students had control of their strategy. So let's say we're teaching pronouns. We say we're going to teach there, there, there. Now, do you want a rule? Do you want to see an example? You want to practice? And you choose as many examples you want, as many practice you want, so forth. So the NSF people are saying, you've got to be kidding me. Students won't know how to do that. That's really difficult. And I happen to be the one presenting at the blackboard. And I said, oh yeah, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Now I have to back up for just a minute. Larry Stollerow gave a lecture that I never forgot. He went to the blackboard, he drew a circle, he said, this is a student. He drew a square, he said, this is the teacher. He drew an arrow up and an arrow down. And he said, a computer-based teaching machine will have a teacher that knows how to teach. It'll interact with the student. But sometimes a teacher falls apart and doesn't know what to do next. So he drew another square, he said, this is called the professor. And another arrow down and up, and he said, so when the teacher starts to have trouble, the professor will step in and help the teacher come up with a new strategy. So I said to the people from NSF, oh yeah, this is going to be easy. We're going to have an advisor system on this system, and the advisor is going to know how to teach. And so when the student gets stuck, they can go to the advisor, and the advisor will tell them what to do next. And all my people in the back are going, you know, and they said, they really got mad at me. They said, we don't know how to do that. I said, yeah, I know how to do that. And so actually it took 3 weeks off, and I went out in the park and yelled and screamed for about 3 weeks and developed a decision tree that was basically an overlay expert system, but I didn't know about overlay expert systems in those days. So the ticket system had an overlay expert system that would teach students how to do that. So that was kind of the thing going. In the meantime, beyond that, make it very quickly, Zhongmin Li was one of my students at USC. Probably the smartest single man I've ever met in my life in terms of just raw intelligence. The guy was just beyond amazing. And so he was in my class one time. He wrote a paper for me. We were talking about computer-based instruction. He wrote a paper. I got the paper. I could barely read it because the English was so absolutely terrible. But I didn't care about that because the ideas that were coming through said, oh my gosh, this is really fantastic. So I called him after class. I said, Zhongmin, I need to see you. You're all nervous. Oh, what did I do? I said, nothing. So my English is so terrible. I'm so sorry. I said, I don't give a dang about your English. Your ideas are brilliant. I want you to work for me. And so he started working with me. It did for the next 4 or 5 years. We developed an expert system. Expert systems were coming on board at that point in time. An expert system that designed instruction, but it ended up with a design document. And I said, that's kind of dumb. What we need is an expert system that actually will do the instruction. And so, you know, the design document make the decisions about what we need to do, but when we know what to do, then we ought to have this already built in the system. Can you do that? And he said, you bet, I can do that. I don't think he said, you bet, he said, I can do that. I said, do it. And so we developed what we call transaction shells, little shells that knew how to teach concepts, knew how to teach rules, and I do all these by consulting with companies so they got paid for it. And this was really a fun kind of a thing. And then we put together this big proposal. Some people from Germany came out, from Bodon Software. They came out and they said, we've read your article on expert system for instructional design. We want to build the ultimate instructional design system. And how much would that cost? And so I went to the blackboard and I ironed it out and I said it would cost about $4 million to do what we want to do. And they said, so. And I said, what? And so we got this huge contract to develop the ID expert system. And so then we took these ideas that we had, put them all together into a big system. We had a 4-year contract. We got to the end of the first year and the world came to an end. Their company went bankrupt, not because of us. The stopped, we played around with it a little bit while, but we never get ID expert finished. But after that, I got a couple of really bright students that came to work with me, and they said, we want to still build these expert systems. So they built what they call the electronic textbook, which knew how to teach, and all you had to do was bring content in. And then Lester Drake, who is another really brilliant programmer, built the instructional simulator. And I said, oh, that was fantastic. And so now we could build simulations. All you have to do is bring your content, and the thing knew how to build a simulation. It was a really powerful thing. These were all programmed in Toolbook. And so we had these two things. Now, that's the end. But I have two comments. I was asked to talk about why is this important and where are we going. The instructional theory, I think, is important because there have been several studies done on the use of first principles of instruction, one with a whole bunch of MOOCs, one with about 1,000 courses on marriage, and my own work at the American University of Nigeria, where I had the chance to review all of the syllabi of all of the faculty. And what I found out is most instruction does not use good first principles of instruction, almost period. And I think I'd say without fear of contradiction, if we go on the internet, shows 100 courses on the internet, the probability that they use very much of really good instructional strategies is really low. So my first concern is, somebody said, where's the future? And I said, I don't know where the future is, but I know one thing that needs to happen. We need to concentrate more on making sure good strategies get involved in instruction. So that's, I tried to do my part. So please, some of you pick it up and do, we scratched the surface, a lot more needs to be done on that. Second idea, I love the idea of automating instruction. I love the idea of making a computer do whatever we can. I love the whole notion of artificial intelligence. Having built one artificial intelligence system, even before I knew how to do it, was really fun for me. It was really exciting, and it really worked, by the way. And so one of the things that we tried to do toward the end of that was, how do you represent knowledge, content, in a way that you can compute on it? Numbers are easy to compute on. Word processors can compute on certain things, but they don't know what they're computing on. But when you're presenting content, you got to have that content represented in a way. When you write a code to manipulate that content, you got to know what you're manipulating. And so you need some way to represent that. And so if you're interested in that, there's a couple of papers on my website, mdavidmerrill.com, which talk about our attempt to build knowledge representation. If I was 20 years old again, 30 years old, or even 50 years old, or even 70 years old, I would love to go back and work more on that whole idea. It kind of got dropped the last decade because of my work on first principles of instruction, and I ran out of funding, and I was no longer at a university, and I didn't have all these really brilliant graduate students that knew 100 times more than I do. And so if that would magically happen, I would love to work on this again. So that's where I think we need to go as well. Thank you very much.
I know you probably have a lot of urgent questions, but due to the time, just if you could write down your questions, I'm going to ask